Boss took all the credit, then blamed me for his mistake, so I exposed everything. I never thought I'd be the one to revolutionize our company's future. Not because I lacked confidence in my abilities. I've been coding since I was 12, but because Tech Fusion had always been a place where good ideas went to die. That is, until my app changed everything. My name is Alex Chen, a mid-level developer, who'd spent 4 years being the reliable workhorse at a company that specialized in enterprise software solutions. Nothing glamorous, just steady work building custom apps for businesses that couldn't afford the big names. In meetings I was the quiet one who spoke only when necessary, preferring to let my code do the talking. That all changed the night I couldn't sleep. It was 3 a.m., and I was staring at my ceiling, thinking about how I'd forgotten to take my allergy medication 3 days in a row, again. The pattern was frustratingly familiar: remember at work, forget at home, suffer the consequences. As I reached for my phone to set yet another reminder, something clicked. The problem wasn't memory, it was habit formation. By sunrise, I had sketched the framework for what would eventually become LifeSync, an AI-powered habit tracking app that didn't just remind you to do things, but learned your behavior patterns to integrate new habits into your existing routines. The app would analyze when users were most receptive to building new habits and use behavioral psychology to make changes stick. I couldn't contain my excitement when I arrived at the office that morning. Dark circles under my eyes but buzzing with energy. I headed straight for Darren Thompson's office, my direct supervisor and Tech Fusion's rising star. "Alex, you look like hell," were his first words as I entered. Darren was the kind of manager who wore custom suits to an office where hoodies were the norm. His carefully styled hair and practiced smile had charmed clients and executives alike, propelling him up the corporate ladder despite his limited technical knowledge. "I haven't slept, but it's worth it. I have an idea that could change everything," I said, spreading my sketches across his desk. "An AI habit-forming app that actually works. Not just reminders, but predictive technology that integrates with your life." Darren's expression shifted from annoyance to intrigue as I explained the concept. He leaned forward, quickly recognizing the potential. "This could be big. Really big," he murmured, more to himself than to me. "The healthcare applications alone." "Exactly," I said, relieved he understood. "And fitness companies, productivity platforms, mental health services, they'd all want to integrate with it." Darren tapped his fingers on the desk, then made the decision that would change both our lives. "I want you to develop this. Full resources, 20% of your work hours dedicated to this project. I'll clear it with upper management." I could barely contain my smile. "Thank you, you won't regret this." "Don't thank me yet," he said with a wink. "Make it work first." The next 4 months became a blur of code, coffee and late nights. While Darren handled the bureaucracy, securing resources and providing basic oversight, I built LifeSync from the ground up. The architecture was entirely my creation, the algorithm my brainchild. I designed every aspect of the user experience, crafted the branding, even selected the color scheme that would become its signature look. Darren's contributions were minimal, but strategic. He'd pop by my desk occasionally, ask for progress updates, and suggest tweaks to make the app more marketable. "Make the interface cleaner here, or can we add a social sharing component?" Nothing fundamental, just surface-level input that nonetheless made him feel involved. I didn't mind. Having Darren's backing meant protection from other projects and demands on my time. Besides, in my mind we were building something together. He was handling the business side while I created the technology. A partnership of sorts. The app began taking shape, and early internal testing showed promising results. Employees who tried the beta version reported significant improvements in their habit-forming success rates. The AI component was learning, adapting, and proving my concept worked. Word spread through the company, eventually reaching the executive floor. Soon I found myself in the boardroom, demonstrating LifeSync to the C-suite while Darren stood beside me, occasionally jumping in to emphasize a feature's market potential. "This is exactly what we need to enter the consumer market," our CEO said, clearly impressed. "The National Innovation Summit is coming up in 2 months. If we can showcase LifeSync there, we might just have a shot at the Breakthrough Technology Award." My heart raced at the possibility. The summit was the premier event in our industry, covered by every tech publication worth reading. Winning would put Tech Fusion on the map and my career would soar. "We'll be ready," Darren assured them, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Alex and I will make sure of it." Those 2 months were the most intense of my professional life. I refined the algorithm, expanded the feature set, and fixed countless bugs, all while collaborating with the design team to perfect the user interface. Darren became increasingly involved, scheduling daily check-ins and providing more hands-on feedback. I interpreted his growing interest as excitement about our shared vision. The night before the submission deadline, we stayed until midnight finalizing everything. I compiled the presentation materials, technical documentation, and demo version. Then handed it all to Darren, who, as project manager, would handle the official submission. "We did it," I said, exhausted, but proud. "We sure did," Darren replied, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Get some rest, I'll take care of the rest." I should have noticed something was off in his tone, but I was too tired to analyze it. 3 weeks later, I was working late when my phone buzzed with a notification. A colleague had tagged me in a post. "Watching the National Innovation Summit live stream. Isn't that your app?" I quickly pulled up the stream just in time to see Darren walking onto the stage, alone, to accept the Breakthrough Technology Award for LifeSync. My breath caught in my throat as he began his speech. "I want to thank the judges for recognizing the potential of what I've created with LifeSync," he said, his voice smooth and confident. "This represents thousands of hours of my work, a vision I've had for transforming how people build habits." The room spun around me. My name wasn't mentioned once. I sat in stunned silence as the live stream continued, watching Darren bask in the applause that should have been, at least partly, mine. My phone buzzed incessantly, colleagues who knew the truth sending messages of confusion and outrage. "Did he just take full credit for your app? Alex, what the hell? Why aren't you up there? Is this some kind of mistake?" But one message from Melissa, our UX designer, who had helped with some of the interface elements, stood out. "Document everything, Alex, right now." I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I paced my apartment, alternating between rage, disbelief, and a sick feeling of betrayal that settled like lead in my stomach. By morning, I had convinced myself to be strategic. Confronting Darren immediately might be satisfying, but it could backfire. After all, he was management, and I was just a developer. In the corporate hierarchy, that difference mattered. When Darren returned to the office 2 days later, a award prominently displayed on his desk, he acted as if nothing unusual had happened. He nodded at me in the hallway, even stopped by my workspace with a casual, "Great job on that code-base cleanup last week." The cognitive dissonance was staggering. I wanted to scream, to demand recognition, to ask how he could look me in the eye. Instead, I said, "Thanks. Congrats on the award." His smile never wavered. "Appreciate it. Big win for the company." I told myself maybe this could work out. Darren had the spotlight, but I still had the app in my portfolio. When future employers asked about my contributions, I could show them the code, prove my work. Besides, if LifeSync succeeded, we'd all benefit through company growth, possible bonuses, maybe even equity if things went really well. What naive thinking that turned out to be. Within a week, the silent erasure began. First it was subtle. My name disappeared from the internal documentation. Then when I tried to access the GitHub repository to make some improvements, I found my permissions had been downgraded from administrator to viewer. "Just a security protocol," Darren explained, when I inquired. "Since we're moving into the commercial phase, we need to limit full access." "You understand?" I didn't, but I nodded anyway. Next came the client presentations. Tech Fusion began showcasing LifeSync to potential investors and partners. Meetings I naturally assumed I'd be part of, but the invites never came. "The executives want to keep these meetings streamlined," Darren told me when I asked why I wasn't included. "Too many technical details can overwhelm potential clients." The irony was painful. The technical details were the entire point of the app. During one team briefing, I tried to answer a question about the AI algorithm's learning pattern, a system I had personally designed from scratch. "I can take that one," Darren interrupted smoothly, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Let's not get too deep in the weeds." He proceeded to give an explanation that was technically incorrect but delivered with such confidence that no one questioned it. After the meeting, he pulled me aside. "Alex, In these settings, it's better if I handle the technical explanations. Consistency in messaging is key for the brand. The message was clear: be quiet, stay invisible. By the third week, rumors began circulating about a reorganization. The success of LifeSync meant Tech Fusion would be shifting resources, creating a dedicated team focused solely on developing and marketing the app. Will I be leading the development team? I asked Darren during our one-on-one. He looked uncomfortable for the first time. We're bringing in a senior developer from outside, someone with consumer app experience. But I built LifeSync from the ground up, I protested, finally letting some frustration show. No one knows it better than I do. The board wants fresh eyes, he said firmly. You'll still be on the team, of course. Your institutional knowledge is valuable. Institutional knowledge. Like I was some legacy system being maintained rather than the creator of their breakthrough product. That night, I discovered my company profile had been updated. Previously listed as lead developer LifeSync, my title now read Developer Enterprise Solutions. I was being systematically erased from my own creation. Through it all, I noticed Rachel from legal watching these developments with narrowed eyes. Once, after a particularly frustrating meeting where Darren presented his roadmap for LifeSync's future, she stopped me in the hallway. This isn't right, she said quietly. What he's doing? I shrugged, affecting indifference. I didn't feel, it's just business, right? No, she replied, her expression serious. It's theft, and sooner or later it'll catch up with him. I wasn't sure I believed her, but her words gave me a small comfort. The final straw came when marketing unveiled the new promotional materials for LifeSync's commercial launch. In a glossy brochure, there was Darren's smiling face above a quote: LifeSync represents my vision for how technology can transform human behavior. Every line of code reflects my belief that habits shape destiny. Every line of code, my code. That evening, as I stared at the brochure on my desk, something shifted inside me. The resignation that had sustained me these past weeks cracked, revealing a determination I'd suppressed. I opened my personal laptop and began methodically downloading backup copies of every piece of evidence I could find that proved my authorship. I didn't know yet what I would do with it all, but I knew one thing: I would not remain invisible forever. Launch day arrived with the kind of corporate fanfare Tech Fusion rarely displayed. The lobby featured a massive banner with LifeSync's logo alongside Darren's professional headshot. Catering served breakfast while executives mingled with invited tech journalists and potential investors. I stood in the corner, nursing a coffee, watching everyone celebrate my creation while feeling like a ghost at my own party. Darren spotted me from across the room and made his way over, champagne flute in hand. Big day, he said, clinking his glass against my coffee mug. You should be proud. Proud of what, exactly? I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. His smile tightened. Being part of the team that brought this to life, of course. Part of the team, I repeated. Interesting way to phrase it. Darren's eyes hardened for a split second, before his corporate mask slipped back into place. Alex, I know you're frustrated about not getting more public recognition, but trust me, the people who matter know you contributed. This is just how business works sometimes. Before I could respond, he was summoned to give his speech. I watched as he charmed the crowd, describing how he recognized the potential of AI in habit formation and guided the development team to create something revolutionary. Not once did he mention my name. As the morning progressed, I received real-time alerts as the app went live in the major app stores. Despite everything, I felt a surge of pride seeing LifeSync available for download, knowing people would soon benefit from my creation. By noon, we had over 5,000 downloads. By the end of the day, but Friday's celebration gave way to Monday's catastrophe. I arrived at work to find the office in chaos. Darren was pacing in the conference room, shouting into his phone while the marketing team huddled anxiously around laptops. Rachel from legal hurried past me, face grim. What's happening? I asked, grabbing her arm. The Nexus integration failed, she said, referring to the feature that connected LifeSync with popular smart home devices. Users are reporting the app is hijacking their devices, turning lights on in the middle of the night, blasting music randomly. Some even claim it's interfering with their security systems. My blood ran cold. The Nexus integration was the one feature I had explicitly advised against implementing without further testing. Darren had overruled me, insisting it needed to be included in the initial release to impress investors. "Where's the rollback?" I asked, already moving toward my workstation. "We need to deploy the previous build without that feature." "Darren tried," Rachel said, following me. "But apparently there's some issue with the deployment protocols. He can't access the right credentials. Because he didn't build it," I thought bitterly. "He doesn't know how the system works." Within minutes I had pulled up the deployment console and initiated the rollback procedure. It would take about an hour, but it would stop the ongoing damage. I was just about to notify the crisis team when Darren burst out of the conference room, his face thunderous. "Emergency board meeting. Now," he announced, pointing directly at me. "You too, Alex." The boardroom felt like a courtroom, with Tech Fusion's executives and major investors seated around the massive table, faces stern. One-star reviews of LifeSync projected on the wall behind them told the grim story. Our app had gone from potential breakthrough to public relations nightmare overnight. CEO Margaret Winters spoke first. "Darren, explain what happened." Darren stood, hands planted firmly on the table. His usual charm was gone, replaced by a grave professionalism. "We've identified the issue. A fundamental flaw in the app's architecture caused the Nexus integration to behave erratically." My jaw dropped. The architecture was sound. I had built it myself. The problem was the untested integration code Darren had insisted on adding. "The good news," he continued, "is that we've initiated a rollback to a stable version. The bad news is that we're looking at significant damage control. At least 3 major publications are already running stories." Margaret frowned. "How did this happen? You assured us everything was ready." And then, with calculated precision, Darren turned to look at me. "Unfortunately, it appears Alex's original architecture had serious flaws that weren't apparent in our internal testing. I raised concerns about the technical foundation several times, but was assured it would handle the integrations." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to me. "That's not," I began, but Darren continued smoothly. "I take responsibility as project lead for not demanding a more thorough code review. I trusted Alex's work, given his reputation within the company. Clearly that was a mistake." The blood rushed to my face. "That's absolutely false," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "The architecture is solid. I specifically warned against implementing the Nexus integration without further testing. I have the documentation." "Documentation you modified last week," Darren interrupted, raising an eyebrow. "We can see the edit history, Alex." My mind raced. I hadn't modified anything, but Darren had access to all the internal systems. Could he have altered the timestamps? "This is ridiculous," I protested. "I built this entire app. The problem is the untested feature you forced into the release." The CEO held up her hand. "Enough. This finger-pointing isn't productive." She turned to Darren. "Fix this. Today. We need a stable version back online before the market opens tomorrow." As the meeting adjourned, HR Director Phil Wilson pulled me aside. "Alex, I think you should take a few days off while we sort this out." "Paid leave, of course." "You're suspending me?" Based on his lies? Phil looked uncomfortable. "It's not a suspension, just a cooling off period. And I should inform you that I've had to open a file regarding this incident." As I cleaned out my desk that afternoon, Darren passed by. "Nothing personal," he murmured, not meeting my eyes. "Just business." I watched him walk away, his confident stride unaffected by the weight of his deception. In that moment, something in me changed. This time, I wouldn't stay quiet. The drive home from Tech Fusion felt surreal. 3 hours ago, I had been a respected developer. Now I was effectively suspended, my reputation in tatters, blamed for a disaster I had explicitly tried to prevent. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles turned white. Darren had not only stolen my creation, he was now using it as a weapon against me. I barely remember entering my apartment. I tossed my badge and laptop bag onto the couch and paced the living room, replaying the board meeting in my mind. Darren's calculated accusations. The executives' disappointed faces. The HR director's uncomfortable expression as he suggested I take some time off. My phone buzzed with a message from Melissa. "What happened? Everyone's saying you crashed the app?" Then another from my team member Jason. Dude, Darren's telling everyone you cut corners on the architecture? This is insane. The injustice of it all hit me like a physical blow. I slumped onto my couch, overcome by a wave of helplessness. For a moment I considered simply walking away, finding another job, starting fresh somewhere else. Why fight a battle against someone who clearly had management wrapped around his finger? But as I sat there, my gaze fell on my personal laptop. The same one I'd used to back up evidence of my contributions to LifeSync. Wait, I hadn't just backed up evidence of my contributions. I had meticulously documented the entire development process, every single step. I powered up my laptop and opened my secure cloud storage. There they were, folders of screenshots, code repositories, design documents and communication logs. I had everything, the initial concept sketches, the architecture diagrams I'd created, the UI mockups, even the exchanges where Darren had demanded the Nexus integration despite my warnings. But did I have proof he modified timestamps? I dug through my backup archives until I found what I needed. A snapshot of the documentation from before the launch, showing my original warnings about the Nexus integration. The metadata clearly showed these documents predated the launch. Then there was the voice memo. A recording from our final pre-launch meeting, where I had once again raised concerns about the Nexus feature. And Darren had explicitly overruled me. We're launching with it, he had said. The integration is what will set us apart. I'm making the call. I leaned back, a strange calm replacing my earlier distress. I had everything I needed to exonerate myself, but simple exoneration wasn't enough anymore. Not after what Darren had done. I needed help, someone outside, Tech Fusion who understood the industry and had connections I lacked, and I knew exactly who to call. Meena Patel had been my colleague at Tech Fusion for 3 years before leaving to join Horizon Technologies, one of our main competitors. We'd stayed friends, occasionally meeting for coffee to discuss industry trends. Meena was now Horizon's director of product development, and she had never been a fan of Darren's management style. Alex? She answered on the third ring. Isn't it a bit late for a social call? Meena, I need your help, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. Do you have time to meet? Tonight, if possible. 2 hours later we sat in a quiet corner of a 24-hour diner, my laptop open between us. I watched Meena's expression shift from concern to outrage as I showed her the evidence and explained what had happened. That absolute snake, she muttered, scrolling through the documentation. And they just believed him? Without investigation? Darren's always been good at managing up, I said. Plus the crisis was happening in real time. It was easier to accept his explanation and deal with the fallout. Meena tapped her fingers against her coffee mug. So what's your plan? HR complaint? Lawsuit? I shook my head. Those take too long, and Tech Fusion has better lawyers than I can afford. I need to clear my name now, before this stains my entire career. You need leverage, Meena said thoughtfully. Something that makes them listen. Exactly. I pulled up one more document, something I hadn't mentioned to anyone at Tech Fusion. Did you know I filed a provisional patent for the core algorithm of LifeSync, before we even started development at Tech Fusion? Meena's eyes widened. Under your name? My name only, I confirmed. I did it as a precaution when I first pitched the idea. Tech Fusion owns the implementation and the brand, but the underlying algorithmic approach? That's mine. A slow smile spread across Meena's face. That changes things considerably. Over the next 3 hours, we formulated a plan. Meena had connections to several tech journalists who covered innovation in our industry, including Priya Sharma at TechCrunch, who had written a glowing profile of Darren after the award ceremony. Priya will be especially interested, Meena noted. She hates being misled by sources, but we needed more than just media pressure. We needed to reach the people who mattered most to Tech Fusion, the investor. Meena helped me compile a dossier for each major investor, customized to emphasize the aspects they would find most troubling. Intellectual property issues for some, ethical concerns for others, potential market reputation damage for the rest. What about your job? Meena asked as we finalized our strategy. You realize you're probably burning that bridge completely. I nodded. I know, actually. I hesitated, then decided to be direct. I was wondering if Horizon might be interested in someone with my experience. Meena's expression turned serious. Alex, if even half of what you've shown me checks out, I can guarantee Horizon would be very interested in both you and your algorithm. Very interested indeed. As dawn broke, we parted ways with a clear plan and timeline. Nina would make the introductions to key journalists, while I prepared the technical documentation that would explain the situation clearly to industry insiders. I walked to my car feeling a strange mixture of dread and exhilaration. In just a few days, I would either salvage my reputation and career, or burn it all to the ground trying. Either way, Darren Thompson was about to learn a valuable lesson about taking credit for other people's work. 3 days of administrative leave passed in a blur of preparation. Nina and I had mapped out a precise timeline, coordinating each element of our plan like a military operation. The target, Tech Fusion's major investor webinar, scheduled for Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern, an event where Darren would be the star presenter, showcasing his breakthrough app to potential Series B investors. Are you sure about the timing? Nina asked during our final call on Wednesday night. We could start with the journalists, give Tech Fusion a chance to address this internally. No, I said firmly. They've had that chance. Darren needs to face this publicly, the same way he publicly took credit and publicly blamed me. I barely slept that night, going over the plan repeatedly, checking and rechecking the evidence packages I'd prepared. By morning I felt strangely calm. The die was cast. All that remained was to follow through. At precisely 1:45 p.m. on Thursday, 15 minutes before the investor webinar, I published a comprehensive LinkedIn post. The title was simple: The True Story Behind LifeSync. I detailed the app's development chronology with links to time-stamped evidence, screenshots of my original concept documents, and technical explanations that only the actual creator could produce. I tagged Tech Fusion, the National Innovation Summit, and every investor I knew was attending the webinar. Simultaneously, Nina sent our carefully prepared dossiers to each investor's email, timed to arrive as they were settling in for Darren's presentation. The subject line read, "Critical information regarding today's LifeSync presentation." At 1:55 p.m., Priya Sharma from TechCrunch published her first tweet, "Developing story, award-winning app, LifeSync, at center of intellectual property dispute." Sources claim credited creator Darren Thompson may not be the actual developer. Story dropping in by 2 p.m. my phone was already exploding with notifications, but I ignored them all. Instead, I logged into the investor webinar using the link Nina had secured for me. I needed to witness what happened next. Darren appeared on screen, confident as ever in a crisp blue suit, apparently unaware of the storm brewing. "Good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited to share the next phase of LifeSync's journey with you today." He launched into his rehearsed introduction. But I could see something was wrong. Several investor boxes on the Zoom grid showed people looking down at their phones or speaking to someone off camera. In one window, I watched an investor's expression change from interest to shock as she presumably read the dossier. 7 minutes into his presentation, Darren was interrupted by CEO Margaret Winters, who abruptly appeared in the frame. She whispered something in his ear that made his face drain of color. His eyes darted to his phone, which was probably lighting up with notifications like mine. We may need to take a brief pause," Darren stammered, his carefully cultivated poise cracking. "There seems to be a technical issue." Margaret took over smoothly. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the interruption. We need to address some information that has just come to our attention. We'll reschedule this presentation after we've had a chance to clarify certain matters. Thank you for your understanding." The webinar ended abruptly, but the real show was just beginning. My LinkedIn post exploded, reaching over 10,000 views within the first half hour. Industry insiders began sharing it, adding their own comments. Always knew something was off about Thompson's technical explanations. This makes much more sense. If these documents are verified, this is one of the most blatant cases of idea theft I've seen in the industry. By 3 p.m., Priya Sharma's full article dropped on TechCrunch. Startup star accused of credit theft, the real developer behind LifeSync speaks out. The piece was meticulous, presenting my evidence alongside statements from former colleagues who confirmed my role in the app's development. Priya had even managed to get a quote from one of the National Innovation Summit judges, who expressed concern about the award's legitimacy. At 3:30 p.m., my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. It was Rachel from Tech Fusion's legal department. "The board wants to meet with you," she said without preamble. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Am I fired? I asked bluntly. There was a pause. No, she said finally. But Darren might be. It's not good, Alex. The investors are furious. 2 have already threatened to pull out. Do they believe me? The evidence is compelling, she admitted. And Darren's response has been unconvincing. He keeps changing his story. After Rachel's call, I finally checked my messages. There were dozens from former colleagues, all expressing shock and support. But one stood out, a text from Melissa that simply read, Darren just got escorted out by security. Holy shit, Alex. You did it. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt oddly hollow, like I'd expended all my emotional energy in the build-up to this moment. I wandered to my kitchen, made a cup of tea and sat on my balcony watching the sunset. My phone pinged with an email notification. It was from Nina. Horizon's CEO wants to meet with you tomorrow afternoon, and Priya needs a follow-up interview. You're about to become very popular, my friend. As darkness fell, my phone lit up with a final notification, a breaking news alert from TechCrunch. TechFusion announces immediate leadership changes following LifeSync controversy. It was over, and somehow, it was just beginning. The TechFusion boardroom felt different this time. Instead of being summoned like a disobedient employee, I entered as someone who held real power. Margaret Winters, the CEO, rose to greet me personally, a courtesy she'd never extended before. Alex, thank you for coming, she said, gesturing to a seat directly across from her. The entire executive team was present, along with 2 people I recognized as board members. Conspicuously absent was Darren. I appreciate the invitation, I replied, keeping my tone neutral as I sat down. Margaret didn't waste time with pleasantries. We've reviewed your evidence thoroughly. The documentation is comprehensive and damning. She glanced at Phil from HR, who nodded grimly. Darren Thompson has been terminated, effective immediately. I absorbed this information without visible reaction, though a small weight lifted from my shoulders. We owe you an apology, Margaret continued. What happened was unacceptable. We failed to perform due diligence when allegations were made, and we allowed a toxic situation to develop under our watch. Phil slid a document across the table. This is a formal retraction of any negative reports in your employment file. We're also prepared to offer you a significant retention package, including Darren's former position as Director of Innovation, with a substantial salary increase. I glanced at the document but didn't touch it. And LifeSync? Full creative credit will be restored to you immediately, Margaret assured me. We're issuing press releases today, clarifying that you are the original developer and architect. It was everything I should have wanted: recognition, promotion, vindication. Yet something felt off. This same board had readily believed Darren's lies, had allowed him to erase me without question. Would anything really change? I appreciate the offer, I said carefully, but I need some time to consider my options. Rachel from legal gave me a knowing look. She understood what I wasn't saying. As I left TechFusion, my phone buzzed with a message from Nina. How did it go? Still on for 2 p.m. at Horizon. I texted back a simple, yes. Horizon Technologies headquarters was everything TechFusion's wasn't. Open collaborative spaces instead of hierarchical cubicles, natural light flooding through massive windows, casual dress code that spoke to a focus on results rather than appearances. Nina met me in the lobby, grinning. Ready to meet your fan club? She asked, leading me toward the elevators. Horizon's CEO, Elaine Choi, didn't believe in formal meetings. Instead, she welcomed me in the company's rooftop garden, where comfortable seating clusters encouraged conversation. Alex Chen, she said, shaking my hand firmly, you've caused quite a stir in our industry. Over the next hour, Elaine outlined her vision for bringing me on board, not just as a developer, but as the head of a new innovation department with my own team, budget, and creative freedom. The salary was generous, the equity package even more so. But what really matters, Elaine emphasized, is that your work will always be your work here. We believe in recognizing creators, not just managers. By sunset, I had accepted Horizon's offer and declined TechFusion's desperate counter-proposal. Some bridges, once burned, should stay that way. The next month passed in a whirlwind. I spent my days setting up my new department at Horizon, interviewing potential team members and outlining ambitious projects. My nights were dedicated to something more personal, reclaiming and rebuilding LifeSync. Under my provisional patent, I had the right to develop my core algorithm independently. While TechFusion owned the LifeSync brand, they couldn't stop me from creating something new based on my original concept. 60 days after Darren's very public downfall, I launched SyncLife, a refined, improved version of my original vision. The press release was simple. From the original creator of habit-forming AI technology comes a new approach to personal development. The response was overwhelming. Within a week, SyncLife had surpassed LifeSync's download numbers. Tech publications ran side-by-side comparisons, invariably concluding that SyncLife was superior. One reviewer summed it up perfectly: it's the difference between a creation built with passion and one built for profit. TechFusion stock dropped 15% after SyncLife's launch. I heard through industry channels that they had quietly shelved LifeSync, unable to maintain it without my expertise. Darren, meanwhile, had disappeared from the tech scene entirely. His LinkedIn profile now listed him as a strategic consultant, the traditional refuge of those whose reputations couldn't secure actual employment. 6 months after my confrontation with Darren, I received an unexpected visitor at Horizon. Melissa, my former colleague from TechFusion, stood awkwardly in the reception area. "I'm interviewing for your UX designer position," she explained. "TechFusion isn't the same anymore. Everyone talented is leaving." I smiled. "Let me show you around." As we toured Horizon's creative spaces, Melissa asked the question many had wondered but few had voiced: "Do you ever regret exposing Darren so publicly?" It was brutal. I considered this as we paused by a window overlooking the city. "I regret that it was necessary," I finally said, "but I don't regret standing up for myself. Talent and hard work should be recognized, not exploited." Later that evening, I received the final piece of validation, a notification that SyncLife had been nominated for the National Innovation Summit's Breakthrough Technology Award. The same award that had started this whole journey. This time, when I walked onto that stage, it would be my name they called, my vision they celebrated. The thought brought a smile to my face. Sometimes you have to lose everything to remember what you're worth.